Revenge office stories. You're easily replaceable. Those were the last words my boss ever said to me. The sentence was cold, dismissive, final. He said it with this thin, self-satisfied smile, like he was swatting a fly, not ending the career of someone who'd poured years of their life into his company. He thought he was just trimming a line item on a spreadsheet before a big sale. He thought I was just another cog in the machine. He had no idea that one of those cogs was about to bring his entire empire crashing down. He didn't know the cog he just threw away was the one who had forged the master key, and he had just given me every reason to use it. This is the story of how I dismantled his world, not with a bang, but with a single, silent click. Before I became his biggest regret, I was his best-kept secret. My name is Sarah, and I was a senior systems architect at a tech firm we'll call Innovate Dynamics. The title sounds stuffy, but really I was a builder. I was one of the founding engineers. The company's big product, a complex platform called Nexus, wasn't just a project for me. It was my baby. I wrote the first lines of its code in a garage years ago. I nurtured it, and I scaled it to serve thousands of clients around the world. I knew its every secret corridor and hidden room because I built them all. I was always a quiet professional. I wasn't the one schmoozing clients or giving flashy presentations. That was Mark's job. Mark was our CEO. He'd parachuted into the company's top spot thanks to a rich uncle on the board and a smile that could sell ice to a polar bear. He was the face, the rainmaker. He wore suits that cost more than my rent and spoke a language made entirely of buzzwords. The thing is, he knew absolutely nothing about the technology his empire was built on. To him, Nexus was a magic box that spat out money. He didn't understand its architecture or its intricacies. He just knew that it worked, and that it made him look like a genius. My team and I were the wizards behind the curtain, working nights and weekends, patching holes, and building the very features he'd take credit for in interviews. And we didn't mind. We loved the work. I thought my dedication and my deep, intimate knowledge of the system made me valuable. Indispensable, even. That was my first mistake. My second was underestimating just how big Mark's ego really was. Mark's ignorance was matched only by his paranoia. He couldn't stand the idea that parts of his own company were outside his direct control. He especially hated that my team held the keys to the kingdom. He saw our security protocols not as essential safeguards, but as a challenge to his authority. About a year before it all went down, he called me and our CTO, a good guy named David, into his glass office. He leaned back in his leather throne, steepling his fingers. "I need a key," he announced, like he was ordering a coffee. "One key. A god mode that can do anything, access anything, override anyone. No questions asked." David and I exchanged a look of pure dread. "Mark," David started carefully, "that's not how security works. We have tiered permissions for a reason. A single point of failure like that would be a catastrophic vulnerability." I jumped in. "He's right. A key like that would be a compliance nightmare. If a bad actor ever got their hands on it, they could do irreparable damage." I told him we already had robust admin tools. What he was asking for was a self-destruct button. Mark just waved his hand. "I'm not talking about a key for other people. I'm talking about a key for me. An executive override. The CEO needs to command his own ship." He didn't want to go through channels. He wanted unchecked power. He wanted a scepter, not a tool. He called it the sovereign key. The name alone was a red flag the size of Texas. He demanded it be built on a framework completely separate from our standard systems, reasoning that it couldn't be revoked by some disgruntled IT admin. It had to be a ghost in the machine. For 2 weeks, we fought him on it. We presented reports, we cited best practices, we warned of the legal and financial fallout. I documented every single one of those warnings. I created a file, C-1337, where I saved every email and every formal protest and had David digitally countersign them. It was our only defense for when this insane idea blew up in our faces. In the end, Mark gave us an ultimatum: build it or you're both out. He was the CEO. So, with a heavy heart, I did what I was told. I built his scepter. I coded the sovereign key with its own authentication portal, totally invisible to the normal network. It had one main function Mark was really proud of: the ability to trigger a global permissions escrow. In theory, it was a last resort security measure. If a massive breach was detected, one click could instantly revoke every permission for every user. Admins, clients, everyone, freezing the entire platform. All the data would be safe, but completely inaccessible. The only thing that could reverse it was the sovereign key itself. Mark loved it. He felt like a king who could put his entire kingdom in a vault. He never once thought about what would happen if the person holding the key wasn't him. I delivered the credentials to him in a sealed envelope. I knew he'd glance at it, file it away, and forget the details. He had his symbol of power. That's all he cared about. I, on the other hand, never forgot. As its creator, I knew the sequence. I knew its name. And I knew the door it unlocked. Fast forward a year. Innovate Dynamics was on the verge of being acquired by a tech titan for a rumored $40 million. For the early employees, it was the dream. For Mark, it was his golden parachute, the proof of his genius. But the deal came with pressure to look as lean and profitable as possible. Mark started looking for inefficiencies to cut, and his eyes fell on the people who had built the very thing he was selling. He called me into his office on a Tuesday. He didn't ask me to sit. "Sarah," he started, his voice clipped and impersonal. "We're entering a new phase for the company. In preparation, we're streamlining operations, optimizing human capital." I just stood there, my heart starting to pound. I knew what was coming. We've looked at the numbers, and we've had to make tough decisions about non-essential personnel. Non-essential. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. I designed the architecture he was selling. I handled the last 3 major server migrations. I could debug a critical failure in my sleep. Non-essential. I finally found my voice. It was barely a whisper. "Mark, the due diligence, their tech team is doing a deep dive on the architecture next week. They'll have questions only I can answer." He smirked. That's what broke me. The smirk. "Our CTO can handle it. The documentation's all there, I assume," he said, a nasty little dig. "Look, don't take it personally. It's just business." He straightened his tie. "At the end of the day, you're easily replaceable." And that was it. 10 years of my life, gone in 10 seconds. Security escorted me out, confiscated my company laptop, and deactivated my accounts. Or so they thought. They followed the standard checklist for a regular employee. But the sovereign key wasn't on any checklist. It was a secret between a king and his forgotten architect. As I stood on the curb, a cold, clear thought formed in my mind. He had called me replaceable. I was about to make myself unforgettable. I didn't cry. The shock was replaced by an anger so cold and pure it felt like a diamond forming in my chest. I went home, sat down at my personal laptop, and for the first time in a week, I took a real, deep breath. He thought he'd fired a cog. He'd actually just released a ghost into the wild. A ghost who knew exactly where all the bodies were buried because she dug the graves herself. That night, I started what I called Project Chimera. In mythology, a chimera is a monster made of mismatched parts. It felt right. I was about to show Mark that his shining empire was a fragile beast, and I knew its every weakness. For 3 months, I lived a double life. By day, I polished my resume and took calls from recruiters, the perfect cover. At night, my real work began. I didn't hack anything or break a single law. I just used the access Mark himself had insisted I create. The Sovereign Keys login portal was still active, just as it was designed to be. It existed outside the corporate network, a deliberate backdoor for a CEO who wanted to play God. He had his key, but I had the blueprint. I logged in. No alarms went off. Nobody was looking for a ghost. I had a god's eye view of everything. I read Mark's frantic emails as he cut corners for the acquisition. He'd postponed a critical security patch I'd recommended just to avoid a few hours of downtime. He'd laid off 2 of my best junior engineers, the very people who kept the client-facing servers healthy. I documented everything. Every corner cut, every warning ignored. I compiled a dossier of his incompetence, cross-referencing it with my C-1337 file, and a plan began to form, elegant and brutal in its simplicity. I wouldn't destroy the company. I would just press pause. I saw the date circled on every executive's calendar, the final day of technical due diligence, the day the acquiring company's engineers would get access to the platform to verify it was stable and secure before wiring $40 million. That was my day. That was the day the Chimera would wake up. Mark had forgotten all about the key he demanded, and he'd definitely forgotten about the woman who built it. He thought he had a shield. He never understood it could also be a cage. What do you think was the single biggest flaw in his master plan? Let me know in the comments, and while you're there, hit subscribe if you want to see how this all comes crashing down. The morning of the due diligence arrived. I pictured the scene, a conference room buzzing with nervous energy, and Mark in his element, radiating fake charm. I imagined David, the CTO, sweating as he tried to answer questions about a system whose architect was gone. I was miles away at my small desk. My blinds were drawn, the only light coming from my laptop screen. I had a cup of tea, my hands perfectly steady. I opened the secure browser, navigated to the hidden portal, and logged in. The system greeted me with a simple, stark interface. No logos, just a command line and one ominous button. Initiate global permissions escrow. For a second, I paused. I thought about my old team and the clients who depended on us. There would be collateral damage. But then I thought of Mark's smirk. I thought of his words. Non-essential, easily replaceable. This wasn't just revenge. It was a lesson in value. My mouse hovered over the button. This click wouldn't delete anything. It would just enforce the rules Mark himself had commissioned. At exactly 10 a.m., the moment the deep dive was scheduled to start, I clicked it. A small box appeared. Are you sure? This action is irreversible without sovereign key authorization. I typed the final passcode, a mix of my mother's birthday and the hex code for the sky in our first company logo. Then I hit enter. On my screen, a single line of text appeared, execution complete. I closed my laptop. The room was silent, but I knew that 60 miles away, all hell had just broken loose. The first sign of trouble wouldn't have been an alarm. It would have been quiet confusion. An engineer from the acquiring company trying to log in would see a simple error, access denied. Then another would try, and another. Soon, panic would set in. An Innovate employee would try the admin panel. Access denied. David, the CTO, would try his master credentials. Access denied. Mark, his face turning red, would be demanding someone fix it. But no one could. Every single user account had been instantly stripped of all permissions. They were locked out of their own house. The data was all there, perfectly safe, but locked inside a digital fortress. The magic box was now just a box. My phone started lighting up with messages from friends still at the company. The whole system is down. No one can log in, not even clients. The acquisition guys are packing up. The $40 million deal was dead on arrival. A software company that can't access its own platform isn't worth much. By noon, the acquiring company had formally withdrawn their offer, citing a catastrophic failure of internal security protocols. The news hit the business journals. Innovate Dynamics was experiencing a public, humiliating meltdown. Mark went into a frenzy, blaming hackers, blaming competitors, blaming anyone but himself. It would never occur to him that the problem came from a ghost of his own making. But I had left him a clue, a single digital breadcrumb. The escrow protocol had a feature I never told Mark about. It created a single log entry, not on the network, but on the physical console of the primary server. To see it, someone would have to physically go into the cold, loud server room and plug in a monitor. It took them 2 days of blind panic to think of it. 2 days where their stock became worthless and clients started activating multi-million-dollar penalty clauses in their contracts. Finally, a junior tech, on a hunch from a desperate David, found the entry. There, in simple green text on a black screen, was the message I left. Global Permissions Escrow initiated via Sovereign Key Authorization at 10 o'clock and 1 second a.m. Protocol designed and commissioned by CEO Mark, last name, date. All formal objections to protocol implementation logged under File C, 1337. That was the kill shot. File C, 1337. My dossier of doom. They pulled the file. They saw the weeks of warnings from me and David. They saw Mark's signature on the direct order to build the key against our advice. It was no longer a story about an external attack. It was a story of gross incompetence. The enemy wasn't outside the gates. He was sitting on the throne. The board convened an emergency meeting. It was a bloodbath. Mark was fired for cause, publicly. The press release spoke of a reckless disregard for company security and a catastrophic failure of leadership. The man who called me replaceable had been replaced. His empire, built on my code, had crumbled because he couldn't be bothered to remember his architect.